So Cathodemer. This is, like I said, it is a CRT display simulator and video synthesizer. You start off with this configuration menu, and it gives you a couple of options. So the CRT's resolution, the virtual CRT mode, and the render mode. It has some presets like the Lynx, the Game Boy, the Apple II, the NES, Neo Geo. I'm gonna select the Neo Geo preset because we're gonna start off with some Breaker's Revenge. You can actually generate this if you wanted to make an HD video. I think you can get up to 1000 by 1000 pixels, but because this is it's like a video, it's like a rendering engine. This shit is taxing sometimes, right? So the higher you crank up the resolution, the more taxing it's gonna be. So we're gonna pick our Neo Geo 320 by 224. You have the virtual CRT mode, so you like different. This is basically different CRT shapes, screen shapes, and then the render mode: rough pixel, smooth pixel, or texture. We can actually change this when we get into it proper. So that is what I will show you in just a second. This is what we're looking at, man. This mess of a screen right here is immediately intimidating. So, like I said, it is a video synthesizer and CRT simulator. It starts you off at the synthesizer page. We're not going to start here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go to source. So, we want to play with some video files or some images, right? So you go to your source file, and you can see here we have a bunch of slots for different images or cameras or streams or files or whatever the case may be. So you can load a whole bunch of different stuff in here. I'm going to open up the Breaker's Revenge intro. And at the top right here, we can set it to online. And boom, our video is playing. You'll see it's kind of dark and it's kind of small. And that is because the CRT rendering engine made it tiny. So first thing that I do when I go into Cathodemer, once I load a video, before we even get into anything of what's going on, what you can do is scale the video up. You can see in the geometry section. So in the geometry section here, we have our scale, and I'm gonna pump it up, and then we go over to extra, and we have the OpenGL settings. And so these are the universal render settings. So we can change the entire screen size here. So we're gonna boost it up here so that it's filling our entire screen. I can now see that it fills my entire screen on the CRT. And then we can scale back down to get our full-size video, right? And so under the OpenGL settings, this is where the renderer comes into play. So there are 3 rendering modes. You can see rough pixels, smooth pixels, and texture. Texture is going to be the closest, if you want to keep it the closest to like the original file, like very little rendering, texture is the option that you want to go for. Smooth pixels and rough pixels basically give you slightly different looks on the image. So I tend to prefer smooth pixel, and then you can play with the pixel size here. Worth noting, pixel size will also change the vibrancy and the brightness, right? So you can reduce the pixel size, but it gets very dark, which makes some of the manipulation different. So I usually just go through and I try to get something displayed on my monitor that looks just a decent look, being like, okay, cool. If I was playing this on a CRT, that makes sense to me. There are some other options here, right? Like some anti-aliasing, which can help. So depending on the look you're going, there's the barrel shader effect, the idea of like the barreling on the actual glass on a CRT, so you can kind of increase that effect. And some other interesting things that'll be worth playing with when you start getting deep into Cathodemer are the pixel update rate and the feedback, which will once again change the kind of universal rendering of this video. Yeah, going back to the source here, right? So we can see we have our video, we can let it play through, and then we have our file playback options here. So one of the things I usually do, right, is I try to find a good screen. You can use images, and there is another tab here that will handle images. We'll get to that, but hey, Miss Tia. There we go. Put a little bit of a barrel on. So we have the lovely lady. So we want to be able to select this. Maybe you want a little bit of motion to it, right? Maybe you want to do a GIF. So over here you can set your file playback to loop, and then you set your start and end point. Boom. So we have a lovely shot of Tia now. So what are we gonna do with it, man? What are we gonna do with it? What do we have to play with here? Of note are the alpha channels and the presentation area here, right? Which has our blend modes. For anyone familiar with After Effects, Photoshop, any kind of image editing, you'll probably be familiar with the blend modes, right? Multiply, subtract, inverse, subdifference, all that good stuff, right? Hey, Jonas, yeah, no worries. Tia's your main. You wish she was in Pocket Bravery? Ha! Yo, if only. How Holosseum displayed their fighters. Okay, yep, yeah, absolutely. So the kind of like reflection of the characters, you might have to go somewhere else to get that. I actually use a reflective surface beneath my CRT and I capture the reflection off of that, which is how I kind of get some of those split images. But yeah, absolutely. So some of the things you can do is strip away the colors, get an isolated bit of the characters, and then mirror them. So there are mirror options for right and left mirror, right? Like that. So you would be able to do something like that in here. I'm not entirely sure how effective it would be. Depends on your exact setup, but that's kind of the joy of playing around, of having an idea and saying, can you do this, right? So you do have a bunch of those tools available in Cathodemer, absolutely. Other than playing with the mirrored effects here, right? There's this volume volume slider, which will come into play as well. And then I said the alpha is the other important part. Now, video synthesis is what this is, right? It's combining two video sources in an interesting way. So you could do that, right? You could take that, you could add in another video source and do something. But one of the tools I want to talk about is the synthesizer. So the synthesizer itself is something that generates video signals and distortion, and then you can combine that with your video. And this is the process that I use to achieve most of the glitch art and the video synthesis work that I have been doing recently. This is another intimidating page. Dude, like you hop around here. I opened up this thing and I couldn't believe it. I was like, you expect me? There is like very little user manual for this thing. They want you to play around, which honestly is kind of the ethos of video synthesis and glitch art. Circuit bending, man, it's about playing around. What happens if you add a resistor here and a pentometer there? What happens? We'll see, right? And so the idea of playing with that is super interesting. So don't be worried about this. You're not going to mess anything up. Play with the settings. Now, there's a lot of information here. And like I said, I don't want to get too technical. Like we can get into how video signals are generated. I would need to actually hit some textbooks first. The easiest way, if you're going to be playing with Cathodemer, the easiest way is you select one of these patches and you can create these patches. So there's a randomize button here. This is probably the way most people are going to use Cathodemer. And honestly, it's the way that I do it a lot of the time. You hit randomize and you see what kind of patterns get generated, right? So I'm going to turn off Tia here and we're going to take a look at just the synthesizer patterns. And so this kind of like harkens back to the video distortion, like the video feedback loops, as well as various kind of like oscilloscopes and audio visualizers. But these are aspects of an analog television that are all on display, and you can change various aspects of the different channels, which will impact the video here. So I kind of like this one. This is a nice blue. I appreciate this blue, right? It's got a nice little pattern here. So to show you what this is all about, right? We have 3 channels, which are all going to influence 3 different aspects of the video signal. If you want to see anything out of these, you need to have your V for value, up, right? It needs to be engaged on some level for this to actually process. Your value, if it's 0, nothing is being produced. If it's higher than that, something is being produced. And your H and S are your hue and saturation. And so this is going to change the look of what you get, right? So you can see, if I drop this down, one of the aspects, which is this kind of like black rippling horizontal pattern, I can remove it if I set it to 0. Or you can make it really intense, and you can drown out this kind of boxy flickering instead, right? You change the intensity of it, and you can change the amount of saturation and the saturation and then the hue. So you can play with it like that. These patterns here are all other kind of knobs and dials that you can turn on the way to producing this video. So, right, you have your X and Y axes, and they have wave patterns. Some of them will impact more than others, but you can see here, so if I crank this up, you can start seeing as I go through the different ones how they impact. So we have this like scooshed horizontal line there, or you can have this rustler kind of effect, rolling effect, right? The frequency will change these things. The phase will change these things. And then your V-sync and H-sync. And so this is the horizontal and vertical sync. Once again, all aspects of like the physical process of analog video and CRTs. Realistically, it's about playing around and finding out. Our Y-sync, you can see, you can set it all the way to the top, or you can start bringing it down, and it creates these line patterns, and they start rolling. And if you change the frequency, they will roll in different sizes and speeds, right? You can change the volume of them to increase their intensity. So as you start playing with these things, you will find interesting patterns and preferred patterns, right? I am not a super big fan of the flashing light. So I like to keep, right, my sync in a way that doesn't have the bright blinking, right? So I've basically eliminated it here, right? Once you have something, so like you can just, once again, you can go random and play through and try to find something that kind of appeals to you, right? If you find something like this, play with the sync to figure out, there it is, right? If you wanted the scrolling lines. So this is one of the ways, actually. This is a good way. This is a good one to keep here. So I'm gonna copy this patch. I'm gonna paste it here, just so I have a backup. Then we're gonna go back to our TIA source. And this is where it gets fun. Man, this is where it gets fun. You can just go into your blend modes, and you can immediately start being like, ooh, okay, what are some interesting combinations? And it's like, ooh, I kind of like this rolling effect, the nice darken. It gives it this weird tint. It's almost like it's a broken CRT. Cool. Now we go to play with the alpha. So this is the other main component of my process when I go through. So, right, we brought in our source. We set our OpenGL settings to something that we like, something that represents a decent monitor with the proper video. Okay, cool. We went to our synthesizer and we generated some video that has an interesting pattern. You play around with some of them. I would probably fine tune this in a couple other ways, but I think this is probably a good start because you can go back and fine tune the patch later. This is why we copy and paste. And what's really fun is that as you explore this more and more, you can copy and you can actually export and then import these patches. So if you find some patterns or some visualizations that really appeal to you, you can then say, okay, great, I'm going to save this one for later, and I'm going to see how I can apply it to a different video at a later date. Or you can import multiple patches and move between them. You can come here. We have our geometry is good. We could play with our blend modes, right? Oh, so we'll go to replace mode, and then in our alpha box here, this is where the synthesis aspect really takes place, right? So you're able to alpha key basically, is what it is. Like, this is like chroma keying. It's basically green screening is what we're doing here, right? As I increase the alpha threshold, basically it is a threshold to which it'll make something disappear. It'll take like semi-transparent pixels past a certain point and just get rid of them. So if you bump up the threshold all the way, it's all the pixels and everything disappears. But you're like, ooh, you can bring it down and you can get this interesting, right? It's just Tia's skin. This is actually kind of cool. It is very busy, right? Like, this is mostly like, it's just like stripped away and then on top. This is just keying and then you put something on top. But you get some interesting looks out of it, right? Like, that is kind of cool. And now, if you take the volume away, you're left with a silhouette. So your presentation and your blend modes and your alpha are really where, once you find your interesting visual and your source material, this is where you start playing with them. And so you can go between your volume, your blend modes, and your alpha threshold. And so once again, we're here with our HSV values, right? Hue, saturation, value. If we bring it down here, right? Let's cut out a bit of the red, right? So that's what's being taken away here. All the blues are left, right? And we start taking away the dark colors, the blacks, into the browns, into the reds. If we increase the value, it'll take more of those colors away, right? So if you wanted to keep this background, which, like, honestly, like, I think this probably looks better. I like the idea of the distortion breaking through into aspects. Instead of it being something like on top, it's you have something has decayed and, right, the busted CRT is coming through. So you can increase your value, and then if you up the saturation, you can see some of the red come back here. With saturation all the way up, you can actually change. There we go. You can change the hue. So what do you want to remove? Now we're looking at it. Oh, okay. We can remove the background. So if you wanted that, background look, you could do that. And so now it's about playing. What aspects of your source video do you find interesting? Do you want to highlight? What do you want to contrast against the other, right, the rest of the visualizations? Playing with the value, see if you can get a nice right? A nice silhouette. So now it's all about fine-tuning. It's all about playing with these components. See, this I kind of like here. So let me bust it up here for you. Yeah, so, right, you can see pulling away and having it come through. This is one of the looks that I kind of like. So all the skin tone plus her bandana and glove, right? And if we go to our synthesizer, we can start playing with the randomizer to see what really pops. Too flashy, too blinky. And of course, if you find something that you really like, you can go in and adjust things like the hue and saturation. If you like a look up here in the top of your synthesizer, you can bump up the saturation and change the hue. So the blue here actually kind of contrasts nicely, right? I actually like this one here. And see how it comes through. So yeah, so right, and once again, it's all about the fine tuning now. So you can see that there are some aspects of the visuals, the sun shining through, and those kind of plot there. The very, very light aspect part of her thigh comes through perhaps a little bit more than you want, right? But there, that's some of the effects that you can generate, right? Now, I want to show you, this is with video. So one of the things about Cathodemer is that there is the source, which allows you to access your video. You can put a camera in, like you can get a camera source in there, something to that effect. But then if you want to use an image, you have to use the figure. The figure tab is very similar to the source tab, but it's weird that it has fewer features in some ways and then more features in others. So you have an alpha threshold, but you don't have the hue saturation value. You don't have your HSV settings. You have a blend mode and you have the mirror modes, but you have the volume here, right? So that matches, and then you have all this extra ways to manipulate the actual position of the image, right? Sunshine FGC's Train Tracks Combat has a character called Miss Hive. You can see her here in our lovely little lab coat. So much like with our video source where we have to online the source, much as with figure, we have to select a patch. I highly recommend upping your size to 512 just to get the highest resolution you can out of this image. And then you throw on your sprite mode and you can, here we go, we can drag it down like that. Because of the limits of the size here, we're not actually able to fill the screen in a certain way. You can kind of manipulate your images to allow you to do that. But once again, that's kind of one of the limits of Cathodemer that you kind of got to deal with, is you got to be cognizant of what your input, what your sources are, as you're going into it. Right, but much like this, we have our blend mode, difference, yada, yada, yada. Ooh, okay. See, and this is really... I would love to be able to get this to be full. All right, here we go. We got her with her glasses on. This is a fun dynamic. So if you can get the full black background and then you use the sub-inverse blend mode, it'll pass through, right, the synthesizer material. It plays with the third track here. So once again, this is the first thing I did where I was like, the primary ways that you're going to interact with the synthesizer are through your values and your syncs. So start playing with your values and syncs and see how it impacts the video. And then you get to fine tune from there. So my H sync, right? I like these vertical lines. I just don't like the way that they're currently scrolling, which is our, yeah, there we go. It's our sine wave here, right? Or our X wave. Ooh, we got vertical lines. We get this bit of, I'm gonna boost it up for you here, right? You have this almost Venetian blinds aspect to this one, which is kind of nice, right? Where you get this like strange vertical banding, almost like it's a broken, like once again, the glitch aspect of it. If we're leaning into the aesthetic, how could these things break? Right? Like vertical sync deteriorating to a point that it's unable to produce the image consistently, but you get these glimpses of it, right? So I'm gonna bring that back down. But for Miss Hive, does that work? I don't think that color really works for her, right? If we go back to, right, our original, right, we got this lovely bee thing going. So we should be in the yellows, man. Maybe yellows and greens. This is kind of nice. But you can see, so now we've lost the Venetian blinds aspect of it, right? And that's because I have cranked up the value here. Sorry, I just heard a weird audio feedback. Right, so yes, the value here is what it determines the intensity of the effect, right? So with no value, you're just relying on the hue from here. So if I want to keep that Venetian blinds effect, instead of doing the master control here, it's better to leave it all the way down and play with your hue and saturation down here. Which is kind of nice, right? Like, I think it matches pretty well. We got, yeah, there we go. We got the yellow orange. Right? And now, do you want any other patterns to it? What other ways can we manipulate this? Once we have the blend between our source and our video synthesis, like our video synthesizer, then we're able to delve into the specifics of this, right? And like I said, man, this synthesizer screen is intimidating, but realistically, knowing that you can randomize a patch to get something that has an interesting component, and then playing with your value settings and your sync settings are going to be the primary ways that you'd be like, oh, that's how it's changing, right? So you can see now, I put up my vertical sync, and it's like, it's in sync, so there's no scrolling. It's completely out of sync, right? So it has those patterns. And as you drop your slider, you can change the direction, you can change the speed. This kind of slow drip is interesting, right? You want to, so like, and what do you want to play with? What are your ideas here, right? I mean, we have Miss Hive here, right? So like, all right, honey, beehive, right? We got the color palette going. I'm trying to get a like whatever, like a hexagon shape, right? To match the beehive. That would be great. We got the slow drip of the honey. There are components from whatever you're pulling from. So whether you want to pull from the like visual aesthetic or pull from the source material, what are different ways you can play with it? So once again, I like where I'm at here, but I want to try some more changes. So I'm going to copy that patch and I'm going to paste it. And I'm going to try messing around with this again. Here's another interesting one. Once you've gotten a little bit comfortable with this, right? We've narrowed down that most of the changes I'm making are being influenced through channel 3 here, right? I haven't really talked about these things here. -1 to 1, 0 to 1, 0 to -1. This is pixel priority, basically, right? And so some of them will not impact anything, and so you get blank signals. Others impact most of it and leave gaps, right? And then you have another one which basically inverts it, right? So you can play around with these and they will change. See, some of them don't impact anything at all, right? So channel 2, our value is all the way down. So none of this is going to really do anything because our value is all the way down. If we put it up, then we can change it, right? We don't want to mess with that. This one's up, so you can change a little bit. I like like I said, I don't like necessarily too many of the bright flashes. So dropping that to low pixel priority gives us this deeper look, like deeper color. And then we're able to play with channel 3 in other ways. So, right, I like the whole effect. And so now it's, can we change? So a little bit of a different direction. This one looks cool, right? So instead of the like scrolling effect, right, we have, I mean, I believe it's still scrolling. It's just scrolling at a really high frequency. But this vertical banding, it's like, okay, the horizontal scroll, like they literally draw. It's a fucking, it's a ray that goes over across and then top to bottom, and it draws the literal lines in the phosphor, right? So like, having the vertical banding is like, for me, is a key this is broken look, which is a core component, right, of the whole glitch art aesthetic. So I really like how this turned out, right? So like from playing with, oh, I found a nice color palette, I found a nice blend, I found a nice color, I found a nice pattern. How can we tweak it, right? So copying that patch, pasting it, and then continuing to toy this time with the phase and frequency. So finding a pattern that you like, right? Because I think this is what we started with. And then we ended up see, and I want the top to bottom look, but now it looks like it's scrolling up. There we go. So we got the top to bottom scroll. All right, but I think we got it here, right? I like the high volume. So here you can change the horizontal phase, right? And then the frequency. This one's kind of nice too, right? I like this fade actually. This is a good approach. This kind of combines the two that I initially had actually, and now we have the horizontal scrolling lines. This is actually what I was initially looking for. When we think back to our first patch that we did, let's go back to that here. I got it up still, right? Our first patch was this, right? Which is not bad. Like you could probably get to here from here without going through these two steps, right? But by just tweaking the syncs and your values and changing, right, a little bit of the frequency and phase, finding the right pixel priority, these are all aspects of it. And what's amazing is that like I know like I can intuit a little bit of this, but like from a technical standpoint, like I still probably couldn't break this down without hitting my textbooks again. Despite all of the options here, don't be intimidated. I'm gonna bring it back full screen here, mostly full screen. And so yeah, you can see here as I move it, right? The H sync, you can actually see the line on the screen as I drag it down, and it starts giving that flickering pattern. But we want the slow. There we go. And then nice, slow dip in tones as the horizontal lines just drag down. I really like this. I really like this. And right, and so for comparison's sake, right? So this is how I started this, right? How do we get from this, right, to this? And it's through this like beast of a thing. But like look at how many. I have not touched the arabesque feature, which is a whole other thing. We haven't touched 3/4 of this. If you just want to get started, I really think Cathodemer is a great way to get into glitch art and video synthesis. It has just enough tools to allow you to do a lot of what you probably want to do, and like lets you learn a bit, right? Like once you start playing around and piecing these things together, even if you don't go and look at any of the technical aspects of the video signals and stuff like that, you can just intuit what volume, what phase does, what frequency does, and how these things impact you. It's really knowing, like I've seen some people talk about Cathodemer and be like, I have no idea, I can never get anything to generate in the synthesizer unless I hit randomize. And it's because they're not upping any of their values. And so and I think you need to up a little bit of value and a little bit of sync. Boom. You have something, right? That's all it takes. So if your value is at something, you can raise it, value, raise, value, raise, right? And all of these things will start impacting different layers. And so this is how, when you want to look at the channels, how do the channels work, right? Channel 1, and then I'll add channel 2. And so it's actually, you know what? It's probably better if it's down lower. Yeah. So that's just channel 1. Add a little bit just with channel 2 and then with channel 3. So it is different layers of the pixels basically that is being impacted here. So yeah, once you find that your values and your syncs are the key components here, you can really start playing around and getting some fun effects. Now, like I said, the one thing I would like to be able to do is I would love to be able to get this as a full screen capture. I might have to crop. Ha! I can cheat. The beauty. The beauty. There you go. Look at our little girl. Our big girl. Our grown ass scientist bee woman is who she is. So yeah, man, like this is the process, right? And so now I have this displayed. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take some photos of this and I will be posting them online. So I will get the capture from my CRT and I will share it with folks after the stream. But this is kind of the process, right? Like how do we get from point A down here, right? on the left-hand side to point B, like this to that. It is a fun process of tweaking, just like turning the dials, man. Like, I will admit, and I will say, for anyone who wants to try their hand at Cathodemer, give it a good go and ask questions, because once you realize what the abilities are, you can start really acting on some of your ideas. So yes, and here's the other fun thing. So, right, I'm back at my, I'll cover up my face and I'll show you guys here. If you go back to the extras and to the OpenGL renderer, right, playing with the rough, smooth, and texture, the renderer settings, is interesting as well, right? This gives you really, really clean lines on the texture setting. The smooth pixel actually shows the shape of your visualization in there, and rough pixels has this kind of this texture to, interestingly enough, texture to it, right? It's not quite as, it doesn't, right? Like, this reveals so much more of the sync, I believe. The rough pixels give you that kind of fuzziness in a way that I feel doesn't quite come through. And then if you want to remove that fuzziness and get the really clean lines, you can go to texture, right? So there are different ways you can play with it. Even once you have, right, you've gotten your source or your figure set up, you've gotten your synthesis between that and your synthesized visualizations, then going back to the renderer to see how it plays is cool, because then, right, you can add some serious glow, go rough pixel, right, and you can get the big TV blur, the super high phosphor level. You can add feedback, which basically, like, it this is, I believe this is like the camera feedback loop, and so it basically gives it extra glow and fuzz, but if you crank it up all the way, it disappears, right? We stop getting the impact because the pixels have just layered on top of each other so much that it's just extra light, so it just increases the vibrance. But if you drop it back down, you can play with the feedback in a way to get kind of interesting blends on this, right? But frankly, the smooth pixel, relatively low pixel size, I think this works really well. Here we go. All right, I'll be sending this one to Sunshine FGC as well. I was very happy that they sent me some character art from Train Tracks Combat to be able to play around with. All right, friends. Yo, thank you so much for joining me here in the basement for some arting. I really appreciate it. This was fun. I like I said, a little bit nerve-wracking actually building this stuff in front of people, and but I like explaining my process. I genuinely do. I think it's important to kind of share any of this knowledge that you have. And folks have been interested in getting, some of their art produced in this fashion. So, I mean, there are a lot of tools out there. Like I said, I have this from Freedom Enterprise, the Mismatcher Petite, which is going to let me get away from the strictly digital environment that I'm working in right now, right? Like I said, this is all software. This is all digital files. None of it is analog equipment, but I like the analog aspect of it. So, yeah, I got this little tool, which is going to let me mash video together and, change them in interesting ways. I've already started working on a little bit, but much like it took me some time to wrap my head around Cathodemer, it's going to take me some time to wrap my head around the Mismatcher Petite. But it is a whole new avenue for me to be able to explore, and I'm excited to share it with you guys as I come up with some interesting stuff. And I hope y'all be there for it too.